Have you had the feeling where there's one thing you do so often that you just excel at it and you're just really proud and you kind of, look back and are glad that you can do that? Or perhaps you kind of have always wanted to get good at something, but you're not quite sure how or to what extent you need to, and kind of like what's the point of getting good at, one thing, for example. See, for me, I've always kind of wanted to be a good cook. I've wanted to be able to, cook really, really yummy food, kind of like what my mom and Nonna would cook, so that I can give my kids the benefit of those really healthy, delicious meals that you won't really find in restaurants because they're kind of more of like almost like considered peasant food, but really, really nourishing and full of lots of sustenance that can kind of really make you just feel like just amazing and just really help you throughout your day. See, for me, the idea that I had at the start of what I wanted to cook or what a good cook would be someone that can cook a million things, right? Now, you might be tempted to think of this, and that actually might be what you kind of consider when you think of like a good chef or a good cook. But see, the problem with this is you're setting yourself up that such that you're at the base of this mountain and you've made it incredibly steep and long and difficult, and it's rainy and it's thunderstormed and like there's potholes everywhere. Whereas you could simply start with something small and simple and get good at that. Wouldn't that make more sense? Well, that's exactly what I'm going to talk about today, right? That's what I want to share with you, something I've reflected and learnt from cooking probably one thing about 30 times now, maybe, or seemingly so often it's just second nature almost, right? See, for me, I am, like vegan, I'm plant based, I love to cook beans, I like to cook a lot of hearty stuff, I like quick, cheap, easy meals. I don't like to spend, I like to spend a good amount of time in the kitchen, but I kind of also want to be able to throw a lot of things together with not a lot of ingredients. But see, the thing is, there's this one recipe that I've cooked, which I actually wanted to almost dedicate this video to explain how I've been able to leverage it and how I've been able to get really good at cooking and everything I've kind of learned from just doing this one dish. Sounds pretty crazy, right? What is the dish? Well, without further ado, the dish is called dhal. Dhal is I think it's an Indian curry with lentils. And simply that's it. It's pretty simple. It's kind of like a little lentil curry, stew, soup, whatever you want to call it. And it's not really that complicated, right? But there's a couple of elements to it which can kind of spice it up or make it quite simple. It's easy, right? So I'll just kind of explain the ingredients and kind of how to go about it before I kind of explain all the ways you can, change and chop it up and everything. Now I like to I use red split lentils over whole lentils. Whole lentils take about an hour to cook. Red split lentils take about 15 to 20 minutes. Similar with yellow split lentils or any other split lentil variety because of how they're constructed, and their density and hardness and whatnot. It's just something. It's like a fun fact. So you need lentils, you need some type of liquid, you need onions, garlic, a spice mix, you need some level of acidity, and that's pretty much it. So the method to do this is simply, from the top of my head, is to get a pan, a pot, heat it up, put some oil in there. When that oil's doing its thing and warm enough, got to have some chopped up onions, garlic. Put the onions in there first, get the onions kind of translucent, almost brown them, get them really to develop that flavor and that base. Then you're gonna add your chopped up garlic for about a minute, then add your spice mix, temper those spices nicely for about a minute, kind of let the flavors bloom from that, because you have to kind of heat up your spices. Now, of course, I know you can use fresh spices and crush them up. I'll get back to that in a second. And then also I use tomato puree, which kind of adds, this jamminess to it. Then I'll simply add my liquids, which is generally vegetable stock, so before that, I'll add the lentils themselves, rinse them, add them, kind of get the flavors mixing, then add the liquids, and then I like to add starches to my dal, so I'll add like either carrot or sweet potato, or even potato at times, but mostly I add carrots, because carrots are really good for you, and simply bring it to a boil. Once it's boiling, have it cook for 10 minutes, have it simmer for 20 minutes, check it at the 10-minute mark. If you need more liquid, add a bit more water, mix it through so it's not sticking to the bottom. And then that's it. Serve it with some rice, squeeze half a lemon, put some fresh coriander on top, you're done. That is dal. Pretty easy. You can kind of almost set and forget it. And it actually kind of taught me a number of things about kind of how to go about cooking this and how you can change it up or make it more exciting, or if you don't have a lot of food, you can, do it a number of ways. What do I mean by this? If your absolute goal, for example, would be weight loss and you're really trying to be, really, really militant about your fat intake, you can even cook this without oil. Just heat the pan. When it's warm enough, simply add your onions, and if they start to stick a little bit, simply deglaze with a bit of water, and then you're fine. So you kind of almost like steam or kind of cook them that way, and you can actually develop the flavors without oil in that sense. So you can have it actually cook in a way that doesn't require any oil. So that's kind of one interesting facet. But another one is I like to add starches to my dal, so it kind of makes it more nutrient dense, which kind of also makes it feel like I'm kind of getting more out of it as a meal. And then of course it kind of helps for meal prep by kind of having something that's more dense and there's a bit more going on. You can, instead of adding vegetables, you can add water, you can add vegetable stock, you can add whole peeled tomatoes, you can add slash passata, you can add coconut milk, or you can add any other milk to make it a bit more creamy. Instead of having it more of a, for example, like a stock type of taste, with veggie stock, which is pretty cool. You can also, what's known as, there's this thing called a tadka, which is you get another pan separate, heat it up with some oil, chuck your mustard seeds, curry leaves in, and maybe some other whole spices, and then you kind of, that sizzles, and then you can kind of pour that over the top of your dal. Of course, it's going to be a bit more rich, but you kind of can add another like depth of level of flavor through that as well. Of course, cooking with starches, like I've mentioned. You can also, what I like to do is add some frozen spinach or spinach towards the end of it. So you're getting much more iron content. Of course, we know that lentils are quite rich in iron, but by adding spinach, you're just really getting a little bit more bang and just level of flavor and nutrients from the dish, right? And then kind of on that point about iron, I recently have invested in it's called an iron ingot, and I have the Lucky Leaf. And basically it's from Canada, and it's actually just simply a piece of like an iron, like an actual iron thing that you put in your like a curry, for example. For 10 minutes, you have to have some acidity, some either tomato or lemon in it, and that will actually leach iron that will be like absorbed into the dish. So it will boost the iron content actually, which is actually really, really cool by quite a lot. So that's another way to get, additional benefits or health nutrients. So you're having something really healthy that's really easy that you can kind of, cook in a really, really quick time, right? And then if you kind of want to cook this, but you don't have onions, for example, you can still cook it with garlic, which I have done. You can even cook it without starches if you've just simply got the lentils. If you have a mixture of red and yellow split lentils, again, same thing. Don't have split lentils, use whole lentils. Kind of get the point. Like it's kind of almost a dish for anyone. And one thing I like to do is I like to add a dal spice mix, which is kind of cheating because there is more nutrients to be had from freshly grinding your spices and tempering them properly from whole spices. But for the sake of convenience, I think it's still okay to, have your spices kind of pre-prepared this way to kind of, again, if you're more likely to cook a healthy dish, why not make it easy for yourself and not kind of feel that you're guilty about it? You can serve this with a type of rice called jeera rice, which jeera translates to, I think, cumin. So you can kind of have a really seasoned rice to go with the dal. You don't have to serve it with rice. You can serve it with, I believe it's chapati, which is like a type of like bread, which is almost like a flatbread. You kind of heat it up a little bit, and that's really yum to dip in your dal. Depending on your flavor preference, you can have your dal more soupy or more thick. What else can you, if you've got really ripe tomatoes, instead of adding tomato paste, you can add your ripe tomatoes to this dal. This dish is good because it teaches you to, chop lots of onions and garlic, which is something you have to cook anyways. It kind of shows you how you are kind of, a lot of dishes have to develop from a base of onion or garlic. So this is kind of like something that you have to get good at anyways. So it's kind of almost like a tutorial level dish where you can cook it, but by cooking it, you actually gain quite a lot of things, and it's not so hard that it's impossible. And of course, depending on, how you're feeling, you can scale up the elements to it. Like you can add, like I said, chopped fresh coriander for garnish. Coriander's great, adds more flavor, more nutrients. If you want to be really fancy, you could even make a coriander oil. So you can kind of have that. If you've got lots of coriander in abundance, you can take some neutral oil, you can fry that and then kind of put it in an ice bath and then kind of blitz it, squeeze out the flavors. So you've kind of got this really rich, beautiful oil to add on the top of your dal, almost like the tadka itself, but just with that freshness of the coriander that you can just keep in the fridge. It's really cool. Done it for basil oil, it's awesome. So something as simple as dal, and of course adding further iron to it, because as of course if you're following this channel, I'm into my cycling, fitness, and I want you to do the same thing. As an athlete, you actually need quite a lot of iron. So by having a dish that's got lentils, which are very rich in iron, an acidity which helps you absorb iron through the use of lemon or tomatoes, boosting iron content with spinach and also an iron ingot, you actually further bolster. It is actual proper like recovery fuel and food. So you're actually optimizing yourself as an athlete by eating something like this. And if you actually want to learn how to cook this, I've made a short already, which you can click, and it will simply show you how to do it. Of course, the description is going to have all the ingredients and method and how you can kind of temper it slightly. But the short is literally a minute and you'll be able to understand how easy it is to prepare. And then what else can I share? Of course, cooking dal teaches you how to make rice. As you can see, there's so many elements that by cooking simply this one thing, doing it many, many times over, you can cook it in a way that you know exactly what you need. You can adjust it based on what's in your fridge and pantry. You can cook it without thinking, so you can play some music, you can have a chat with a friend, you can kind of like unwind after a big day without kind of overwhelming yourself with a really complicated recipe. You can get some really good food in you, and you can just feel that you're giving yourself that love and care and just really feel proud that you can kind of do this, opposed to, like having takeaway or something really unhealthy. So you can really, and that again, the health benefits of it is something that's going to really set you up long term for weight loss, keystone habits. So much more I could talk about, and I kind of almost want to share other lessons I've learned from other dishes I cook on a regular basis. And if you kind of would like to hear me talk more about food and cooking and kind of how it ties in with conquering mountains and conquering life, or what I would recommend to get started from cooking if you're a guy and you're not sure, I can explore that further. I really love to talk about food, and I think any man can get good at cooking, and any guy can simply start with a recipe or two and simply cook it over and over again and experiment in slightly different ways every time to really test out the limits of where their cooking's at and really take themselves to another level. All through simply just cooking one dish. Not having to master a million different dishes, but cooking one dish in slightly a bit of a tweak way. It's almost like okay, so think of it this way. This one dish is like the base video game, And then everything else that we can do to it is almost like DLC or additional content, which just like takes the current game and just makes it really more interesting and more fun and more like enjoyable and more beneficial, right? That's kind of like what I'm really getting at. So of course, that's kind of the reality. If you want to get good at cooking, you don't have to cook a million dishes. You simply have to conquer one dish, conquer one mountain, and by conquering it in different ways, you know, you'll actually conquer life and feel quite inspired to try more dishes or test yourself further. And with the benefits you've learned from cooking this one dish, it'll be so much easier to learn more dishes and so on and so forth. Conquer mountains, conquer life.